Welcome to UMBC's Mic'd Up podcast. My name is Denise Cardona from the Office of Professional Programs. I am joined here with my guest, Michael Schlitzer. He is a recent graduate of our data science graduate program, and he attended UMBC down at the universities at Shady Grove. Welcome, Michael. It's so great to have you here with me today.
Thanks, Denise. Nice to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about you, Michael, and about yourself in terms of your professional endeavors and educational journey that took you to UMBC to study in the data science graduate program.
Sure. My career has largely been in audiovisual design, audiovisual operations, a lot of operations, and then also sales. And I was working in audiovisual and really network operations, and I started there. So it was a good effort and a good contract that I was working on, but I got about a year into it, and I said to my boss, I'd really like to do something different. I'd like to move in a different direction, and that had to do more with programming. And he said, well, go ahead and study stuff. I just go ahead and learn what you want to learn. And so I started off just kind of casting about on Coursera, of all things. And through Coursera, I had grown up really, of course, before the internet. And I had never taken computer science classes at UMBC when I was an undergraduate back in the 80s, mostly because I was not very good at math. And I was afraid of that. But I was pretty good at languages, and so I started taking these classes on Coursera. I took, HTML. I took a little bit of PHP, back-end web development, learned about SQL, and then took a Python class. So I always want to give credit to the great Dr. Charles Severance from the University of Michigan, whose class Python for Everybody, or PY4E, really opened my eyes and changed my life. So I took this Python class, and I really, really enjoyed the Python class. So I finished that specialization in Coursera and looked for something else, and they had a specialization on Coursera in data science. So I started to take that, and that was writing a lot of code and working with data, and I really, really enjoyed that. And as I got into that a little bit more, over the couple weeks, those specializations tend to run in little modules and projects. But as I went through it, I just really devoured it. And I got towards the end of it and said, I really like this. I think I'd like to do this. And most of the classes were through the University of Michigan. And Michigan had released or created a program called, it was a master's degree in applied data science, or MADS. And so I'd applied to that, and it was obviously in Michigan, so it was all going to be virtual. And I was like, man, I would really like to have a person to touch, right? A professor that I could reach out to, classmates that I could sit next to and know personally and say, I have a problem with this. I don't understand. Can you help me? You get it, right? Personal touch. So one day I was driving around the DC area near Shady Grove, and I heard an ad on National Public Radio on our local radio station, WAMU, and they said UMBC has graduate programs in data science at the University of Shady Grove. So literally, I'm driving down on the Beltway, and I go, UMBC. I love UMBC. That's where I got my undergraduate degree. I love UMBC. Data science. Hey, I want to do data science at Shady Grove. Where in the world is Shady Grove? I have no idea where USG is, or what USG is, or how to get there. So I looked it up, found where it was, and then I applied through UMBC, and I was accepted into that program. And I said, this is it for me. And the first time that I went to USG, I drove with my son, who I think was like 14 at the time. And I drove there, and I pulled into the parking lot, and I got out, and I just looked at the campus, and I said to my son, this is going to be good. And for the next 2 years, even though we were broken up with COVID, it was excellent. And so that's how I wound up at UMBC at Shady Grove, largely because of the marketing efforts of the UMBC professional programs team by advertising on the radio.
Yes, that is part of my job, part of my team's
Well,
job. And so it
good job.
worked. Yay.
Good job.
We love
And
hearing
now
that.
every time I hear that ad on the radio, I say, I love UMBC. I love data science and I love USG. So
That's
uh,
you are like a marketing team's dream, I'll tell you that,
well,
Michael.
marketing works. It really
Yes,
did work.
it does work to bring awareness, and that's so important, that awareness. It's funny, I want to go back to something you said that made me chuckle a little bit, because I grew up, I may be the same age range as you, and I grew up where we didn't have computers and such like that. And when I went to college, I remember taking my first computer class was on a DOS system. We didn't even have a Windows back then.
Wow.
And I remember just feeling very lost in the whole computer world. And the idea of studying computer science at that point, or mathematics for me, would have just been the scariest thing in the world. And
Yeah,
it's just interesting how life turns out. And
it
I
is.
am in audiovisual. I mean, that's what I do for the for the university in
Right.
terms of video production. So it's just interesting that I listening to your story was fun.
Sure. No, there's a lot of commonality and connection in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm
great.
really happy to hear that all right, this is what I'm happy to hear. That it's really hard to find a pathway sometimes in life. It's really
Yes.
hard to be able to make that connection and feel like, yes, that's exactly what I need to be doing. Very few people have that privilege. And it sounds like you had that spark that went off. And so it's so wonderful to hear when somebody has that spark go off. I too have experienced that. And it's a really wonderful feeling to be on the path that you are meant to be on. And you can tell you light up when you talk about it. And so that's really important. And I feel like that is when we can really dig in and do the important work in the world. It's when we're passionate about it.
It is. So many times I have children, and they you start off in college and you're not sure what you want to do. And I think it's, I have a nephew in the military, and then kids in college, and other relatives in college, and at 18 years old, you're supposed to pick the thing that you want to do for the rest of your life and get it right. And I remember saying to my daughter, you there's no shame in going, hey, I like this better, and changing. And if you run into difficulty at the beginning and then you change and you find something you like, you can let that go. And that's just a piece of general encouragement, kind of fatherly advice. Don't let past troubles weigh you down like an anchor. Cut that rope and be happy in what you've moved into, and soar as far as you can without thinking, yeah, but I screwed up at the beginning, and I wasn't good at this. Hey, let that go. And I think that's good advice. You can get a degree in one thing, and later on in life, like me, as a what they euphemistically call an adult learner, um, as an adult, go back and find new things. Very little in life is wasted. And so what I found was, as I was in these classes, which were relatively new to me, right? It's old technology, it's SQL databases, whatever. I mean, all that stuff has been around for a long time, and I've worked with it, used it without ever really understanding it in the past. But then as I walked through the classes that I took in the data science program, of course, data science is multifaceted. I'd sit in class and they'd talk about things, and my notes would be like, oh, that's what that project that I worked on back in this time at this place, that's what we talked about. That's how that worked. And so I found again that even though my academic path at UMBC would seem to have very little relationship to my background, either in sales or in audiovisual or in video networks and video conferencing, work is work, and it was all related. And I was able to pull from my past experiences and use it in class to deepen my understanding. That's not unique to me or my background at all. If you work in an office type setting or in any kind of technology, we all use computers these days. Most likely, there's something in the subject matter that you're going to be able to pull from that's going to explain your make the subject more valuable, and to you just more, it's like Velcro, right? More connection.
Absolutely. It's really important. And so here's my next question, and you kind of segued into it a little bit, is what challenged or maybe surprised you once you started in the data science program at UMBC?
The one thing that I really enjoyed about the data science graduate program at UMBC was that it was multifaceted, even though it was very intense, right? At UMBC, we had extremely good professors. So there were classes in machine learning. There were classes in data management, really dealing with databases. There were classes in, quote, big data. I made little air quotes when I said that, which dealt with Spark and all sorts of issues related to data management on the web when you're dealing with live data streams like from Twitter or from things like that. What I really valued about the data science program at UMBC was that we touched on all of those things. And of course, you were required to know those things and work through the class. But it was not just a machine learning program. And if you don't like machine learning, well, you better go someplace else, right? So it was as much an exploration and then fairly deep dive into each of these different facets. But then when we got to the capstone project, which was the last thing we had to do in the data science program at UMBC, you could really pick a project that fit your interests. And so some people did. I focused on really a machine learning project, and other people whose projects were most interesting to me focused on machine learning projects. But other people did visual classification, where you're doing visual imagery and then making real-time learning. It's sort of a machine learning project, but they were dealing specifically with camera images. And other people did big data projects. And so that diversity came out in those capstone projects. And it was not cookie cutter. It was really, make your own adventure based on what you've learned. Make your own adventure. And I thought that was really, really valuable.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very relatable to what you're doing. You could make it applicable to what you're doing. So, what you're learning on Wednesday night in the class, you can go to work on Thursday and apply it. And I love
Yeah.
the idea that you had a variety of different perspectives from the students in your class. To me, that's one of the most powerful things about being in a graduate program is that diversity of thought, of learners, of perspectives, of
Right.
experiences. You have people who just graduated from
Right.
people who have been out in the working world for a number of years, and pooling that information is really a rich experience when you're
Yeah.
learning.
And I think the professional programs amplified that even more because, as you just said, there are plenty of people in there who graduated 2 years ago, graduated from their undergraduate degree in the last 2 years or whatever. But there were plenty of people who, I had one gentleman in my class who had been a math teacher for 20 some years in, I think, Prince George's County public schools, and then wanted to do something different. And so he was there, and he wound up finding work in data science, while he was still in the program. So that was really encouraging and really good.
Absolutely.
But you do have that wide diversity. The other thing that I really enjoyed about the data science, the professional program in data science at UMBC, was there was a big international component. So I was in class with people from, I think from Central Africa, from Iran, from China, from other people from Russia in the class. And so not only do you have all these age differences and experience differences, background differences, language differences, cultural differences, all of those things to me were incredibly valuable and incredibly enriching. And so the first time that we were on campus, I enjoyed that more than really than anything else. Just getting to know people in that context, to me, that was that again. That's what I really wanted to seek out, and the reason that I chose UMBC um, at Shady Grove was because I could meet and touch other people.
It's like being, I'm going to use an analogy here. I've been gardening a lot lately, so I'm going to use that. It's like putting a garden together, right? And the more variety you have, the more variety of flowers, wildflowers possibly that you have, you're going to attract more and more pollinators, and it's going to be an enriching environment for a lot of different reasons.
Right.
And when I think of education, especially at the higher level graduate program, when you have that kind of an environment where you have all that diversity, it really is, it levels it up. It brings you to a different level, and it brings that perspective and real world application to the forefront. Because when we are out in the real world, that's what it is. It's rich in diversity,
Right.
as it should be.
Uh,
And
right.
yeah, so that's fantastic. Now,
Absolutely.
Michael, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now? What is your current role?
Sure. So one of the things that that's relatively complicated, just because it's a little bit in transition. So I'm still working in network operations, but at the same time, what I have learned at UMBC and at Shady Grove in this data science program, what I've learned has enabled me to transition into more where I wanted to go in my work career. So I'm able to pivot into control system programming, because now I understand fundamentals of programming, object oriented design, and things like that. So professionally, it's allowed me to move into a new direction, and I've added some value to the company that I work for, largely through Python, which I had learned and which we used extensively at and really exclusively at the program at UMBC. And then so there's that piece of it, and that's still growing, right? That's not done and dusted. It is still moving on. It takes a while. I also did the cybersecurity specialization at UMBC. That was the second part of my program, because you have to have, just like as an undergraduate, they want you to be a little bit broader. So you could they have, I don't even remember, but there's quite a few, like health informatics and management. There are quite a few other things that you need to take in order to get this degree. And I chose to take cybersecurity classes. So I'm also working towards my CISSP certification as a result of all that I've learned at Shady Grove in the cybersecurity program. The other thing is that through the research that I had done for my capstone project, and largely throughout my time at the program, I've gotten more involved with kind of that community, and so my real goal is to continue working as a postgraduate student, to continue to work with one of my professors to turn this into a paper for publication on the research that I've done. And so, you know, it's a machine learning project, and that's what really has got me interested. So there's a lot of balls in the air, and my brain has is working on multiple levels. But my wife, my lovely wife of 27 years or whatever, a UMBC graduate, I would add, who says to me, "You needed this. You are. I just haven't. It's been a long time since I've seen you so excited." Uh, and just really firing on all cylinders, just with ideas and thoughts, and it's very exciting. So it's personally satisfying, but even though it took a lot of work and a lot of free time away from the family. Of course, in COVID, we were all here anyway. It's been really good.
That sounds so amazing. I'm so happy for you because There's nothing like that feeling of having sparking on all different levels, right? And being
Right?
enthusiastic and passionate about getting up out of bed in the morning and doing some great things and using your mind in capacities that maybe you didn't even think were possible before you actually studied in this program. And
Right.
now you've got all these
No,
expansions going on.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. It definitely has changed the way I approach problems. Because when you think about it, I'm not sure who said it. I think I've heard it attributed to Albert Einstein, but I would not swear to that. Where they said, if the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, then every problem begins to look like a nail. And so if you have a screw and you hit it with a hammer, it doesn't really do much good except do a lot of damage. So what the data science program at UMBC has given me is a whole host of new tools. And so now when I run it, when I'm presented with a problem, I look and go, I can do it this way, or I can do it this way. This is the better way. And then, you come up with a solution that 2 years ago I would never have been able to come up with. I probably still have gotten an answer, right? And, the plumbing might have worked, but it's much more elegant this way and much more reproducible. And so I really value that. And so I have been able to turn that into where at my current job, just turn that into code basically that can be reproduced. And it's very satisfying, personally satisfying to do that. And, nobody knows it, but it's all done with stuff I've learned from school.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such a great statement. And I love the idea of a toolbox because really, when you think about it, as we develop and grow as professionals, we might start off with the rudimentary toolbox with a few little things in there that could work on some things, but you use the word elegant. And I love that because when you think about maybe the toolbox might work for a small scale project, but
Right.
then when you move to a larger scale project and you start filling that toolbox along the journey to that big project, now when you get there and you've arrived there, you have a plethora of tools to use, and the outcomes will be a lot more elegant that way.
That's right. And the other thing that just to your point is, you come across problems, different problems, everyday things you've never seen before. And so I really like toolbox. The other analogy or the other, thing that I think about a lot is a framework. When you think about like people who have been burned, they'll sometimes use skin grafts where they'll use a graft and then grow new skin on that framework to create sheets of skin, right? That can heal people that have been badly injured. So what I think of is when I'm presented with problems that I've never seen, you can use the great internet and you can find things that may work 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was. You can't even appreciate the solution because you have nothing to hang them on. Now, when I say, hey, how can I solve this problem using this framework? Something comes up, something pops up, and they go, oh, this I understand. And then you can go through and it winds up, you find out something that you can operationalize and then you can turn from concept into action or into product. And one of the examples of that in my project, I was using a software tool, an application, or a package inside of Python, and every example didn't fit what I was doing. And so I was quite frustrated because I couldn't find any other examples that fit the way I wanted to use this tool to optimize some of my hyperparameters. So, I pulling my hair out, going grayer, stressing over this. And I had emails of frustration to my professor, who I think just eventually just started deleting the emails. And then go to bed, wake up the next day. Let's try this. So then the next email to my professor is, never mind, I figured it out. But it's all because the work has brought me here up this ramp. So it's again, going back to physics, right? The steps, you can't go from 0 meters to 100 meters, but you can go up a ramp and you can get there and you look back down, you're like, gosh, I came a long way, and I had to take one big step, but it's a 3 meter jump versus a 100 meter jump.
Oh, that is a very strong way to look at it. Very strong way. Michael, as we close out this podcast episode, what would you say was your biggest takeaway from studying at UMBC?
I think, well, my biggest takeaway from UMBC, from studying in the data science program at UMBC, is that, gosh, I love UMBC, and you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. If you're sitting there, I'm an encourager at heart, and I know a lot of times I sit there and go, people say to me, I don't know if I can. No, you can. You can do it. You can do it. Is it hard work? Yes, it's hard work, but you can do this. UMBC, in my case, UMBC at Shady Grove, it really puts the world within arm's reach of where you are. And so we're all filled with self-doubt. We all struggle with doubt. We struggle with issues of, finances, and we struggle with issues of, what if I'm not smart enough? Take the leap. Bet on yourself, because at UMBC, you can do it.
Take the leap. I love that. Yes, you can do it. Michael, I can't think of a better statement to end this podcast episode. I want to thank you so much for being here with
You're
me.
welcome.
You've totally inspired me. I am thinking of the world in a whole new light today. And although I knew a lot of these things on the below the surface, you've just brought them to the surface for me today. And I feel as though I could go out there and conquer the world after listening to you. I'm really glad that. Go get it. I'm really glad that UMBC at Shady Grove, the data science program, has instilled in you this passion and the knowledge for you to go out there and make your world amazing and make the world for others amazing through the work that you do. So thank you.
Thanks, Denise. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to this episode of UMBC's Mic'd Up. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn more about UMBC's graduate programs in data science, please visit us at datascience.umbc.edu.